The aim of contests is to reduce the risk to the UK and its interests overseas from terrorism, so that people can go about their lives freely and with confidence. The new strategy aims to reflect the changing terrorist threat and incorporate new government policies on counter-terrorism. The strategy is organised around four main work streams: pursue, prevent, protect and prepare.
Pursue is the first section of the British counter-terrorism strategy, and it's based on intelligence and the investigation of potential and also planned terrorist attacks against the United Kingdom. There are several issues with this approach due to the current multi-agency handling of counter-terrorism and operations related to said operations. And this causes bad communication and also allows terrorists to slip through the net and also carry out their attacks despite being known by the security services. This is further weakened by legislation preventing the successful deportation and prosecution of suspects. As a solution to this problem, we propose a change to legislation based on the Australian model, which includes increasing restrictions on expression, like extreme expression, and also movement of radical preachers and against suspected terrorists. Furthermore, we suggest that the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre is used not just as a relay between security services, but also becomes like a joint investigation unit, and this will allow for a lower threshold on warrants and the ease of prosecution.
The current prevent strategy aims to stop people becoming terrorists or supporting terrorism by working with a wide range of sectors that are at risk of radicalisation. Prevent will now address radicalisation to all forms of terrorism, prioritising according to the greatest risk. The fundamental problem with the current prevent section of contest strategy is that it currently does not cater for all acts of terrorism. This can affect everyone's safety, as shown by events such as Lee Rigby's murder, the 7th of July bombings and the 9/11 attacks. In order to improve the support to vulnerable people, we need to improve the current prevent policing and improve and to work with spies overseas to track down terrorists more efficiently. Intervention may be useful in order to prevent a hotspot from forming.
Protect aims to strengthen our protection against a terrorist attack in the UK or against our interests overseas, and so reduce our vulnerability. In terms of UK protection, one issue is the privatisation of security forces, which has led to a decrease in control, communication and accountability. We found that improvement should compared to countries such as the USA, and this could be improved by adding more sophisticated equipment and focused technological training.
When we speak of preparing a terrorist act, we mean mitigating the impact of a terrorist attack, where that attack cannot be stopped, and so that increases our resilience, so we can recover from the aftermath. With this in mind, we analysed Contest, which is the UK's strategy for countering terrorism. An issue that was noted was the concept of CBRN, which is referring to chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear warfare. A problem with such an attack is that new compounds are not tested and found before the attack occurs, and cannot successfully mitigate the impacts of such an attack. However, a solution could be to update the Terrorism Act to include relevant information on how to monitor CBRN. We have seen that with the 7/7 bombings, coordination of terrorist acts, terrorist responses is not always quick. For example, with the London Underground on 7/7, it took 45 minutes for emergency services to contact the local area which was affected, leading to a greater disaster. What would be a better solution would to have a centralised and more coordinated response unit, such as seen in Australia with the Counter-terrorism Control Centre.
Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
In terms of pursue, could you elaborate on what you mean by problems within the current system?
Yeah, essentially nowadays there's a hierarchy and it's all arranged as a pyramid in terms of you have your suspected terrorists at the very top and the least likely to offend at the bottom, more like the associates, people that attend rallies. But this system tends to be quite flawed because it's based on evidence, the idea of securing warrants. People on the street preaching about causing attacks and trying to hinder the UK government, the ones you're most likely to get a warrant for because of that evidence that's obtained on those streets. Whereas the ones in the lower echelons don't really have enough evidence to secure a warrant. So for example, Margaret Adept Larger, who was known by security services, wasn't actually arrested or interrogated for any of the crimes he then later committed, and also was approached to be an informant because there wasn't enough evidence to secure a warrant, unlike other radical breaches.
Any other questions? Yeah.
How has the preparation for terrorist attacks improved over the years?
Well, if we look at the example of the Olympic Games, as shown in Munich 1972, preparations haven't always been sufficient and enough to combat terrorism. So in Munich 1972, 11 Israelis were killed by Palestinian terrorists, despite the fact that there was numerous tip-offs to the German government and officials of the Olympic Games. Fast forward 40 years to the London 2012 Games, and we see a sufficient organisation of counter-terrorism agencies. So for example, we had HMS Ocean in the River Thames, a warship, and gunmen on top of buildings monitoring the streets for suspicious activity, and yeah, the airspace around the Olympic Games venues heavily monitored. So with that in mind, there's been a drastic improvement. Despite that, the contest strategy was released in 2011, and since then there has been no significant terrorist attack or terrorist activity in London on a large scale.
The Olympic case was really difficult to prevent. How would the contest strategy improve in order to deal with one-off situations like this one more efficiently?
So we would hope that our new hotline would help situations similar to that of Lee Rigby's by stopping that kind of radicalisation early. For example, while they were at university.
Last question. Yeah.
Cyber-terrorism is growing. What strategies do we have to counter this threat?
Well, I think a key idea would be to kind of create a cyber agency where there's a lone division that looks into the cyber terrorism and looks into developing technology which keeps up with the cyber terrorism in that area. The cyberspace in the UK is an area in which terrorism is kind of growing, and it's important that a certain division looks after them.
Okay, that's all we've got time for.